Right. Welcome back to the Current Conservative.
Hi
Today we have
guys.
on our hello.
Hello,
Today we're
hello.
welcoming Natalie Carey to the pod.
Whoop,
Hey
whoop.
guys.
Hi, Natalie. Natalie's a good friend of ours, and we've just had some good conversations with her over the last couple months. And so we wanted to bring her on, and we feel like she would have a lot to add to the conversation we want to have today. So, anyway,
Without further ado,
Aw, thanks guys.
yeah, let's get started. Let's play our little dance music.
a little intro. Natalie, want
Ooh, we have to dance. The rule. You gotta bust moves.
You're gonna get into it.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god.
Just break the ice. Okay.
This is embarrassing. Is this going on the internet?
Oh my gosh, yes it is. We're here
No.
coming at you live. The TCC girls
Only
dancing
you guys.
on camera.
If anyone else tried to get me to do that, it just would not happen.
What are you talking about?
It's an honor.
Amazing. Well, thank you for amusing us. Natalie, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I am a citizen journalist. I have a YouTube channel, and I just like reporting on a lot of the culture war stuff that's going on, a lot of the stuff that's going on in politics. And as you guys know, we talk a lot about communism and the communist threat to America. And that's something I really like diving deep into as I see it kind of spreading around me in subtle ways and not so subtle ways. So, yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, I guess today we want to talk about just the, as you were saying, how it's all happening around us. And we've been noticing a lot of like trans men intruding upon, women's spaces. And, we had a good conversation, just like, where are the feminists and where is that movement where we thought like, dang, they would have like this totally covered, because they totally run on like smash the patriarchy and crazy sayings like that. And then it's like, wait a minute, okay, so now we're being forced into literally sharing all of our spaces with the patriarchy. So anyway, Sunny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's wild because especially when feminism, like when we were coming up like in college and stuff, it's like this, I don't know what we call it, the third wave of feminism. Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Like they are taking on this new face of like bringing trans people into their feminism, and it literally doesn't make sense to me because they're biological men. Like I just get in fights with people on social media about this because they're like trans, and you'll hear it, like you hear it when they're protesting trans rights are human rights and women's rights, and it's like how are we seriously taking people, like how are we supposed to be taken seriously, and how can we take them seriously if they are trying to convince people that biological men are somehow women because they just claim to be? It's crazy to me, and I really think that the communist ideology rears its ugly head in this way because they've brainwashed women into erasing the own cause that they started.
Literally.
Like they're forgetting their own cause, that they're so, wearing pink hats and marching down Fifth Avenue and marching down on the Capitol, like, women's rights. And now you're just like literally letting men take over. And you think that there aren't people out there who are going to be opportunists, and like Leah Thomas placing first when he was placing 460 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It really gets me fired up. Like it's extremely frustrating. And I can't imagine parents who have their kids working for years and years in sports, like to be at the top of their league, at the top of their sport, and they just get left behind. I mean, even Riley Barker, like she was saying that she tied with someone down to the like 100th of a second. And I don't know if it was, I think it was someone else. Maybe it was Leah Thomas. I actually can't remember.
It was Leah Thomas.
Okay. And they literally got the same same score. And they told her that she wasn't able to take a photo with the trophy because it was better to have a photo op with the trans
Right. I think her name
woman.
is, I think in the media, her name is Riley Gaines. I guess she has like 2 different last names.
I think, yeah,
But,
I think it's her like maiden name and her married name is Barker. I'm not
oh,
sure.
okay. I was also gonna say, like how they're saying trans rights is women's rights. They can't even define a woman.
Hmm.
So how are they like still carrying this narrative that they can now define a woman by saying that trans men are women?
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know.
I
What
mean,
do you
that's the
think?
point. They can't define it. They always just circle around it. They'll find
Yeah,
another reason to refute your argument.
right. What do you think, Natalie?
Yeah, I think, well, if we look at the feminist revolution, or I don't know if they call it that, but the third wave feminism, the second wave feminism, whatever, it all goes hand in hand with the sexual revolution, right? It started out like equal pay for equal work, but it very quickly became like we want to be completely free from any restraints, I guess, on our sexuality. We want to be able to sleep with whoever we want, do whatever we want. Men can have sex with any woman they want and they get called a player, and girls do it and they're called a slut. We want to get rid of that. So we,
Right.
rather than saying we want men to stop sleeping around, they said we want to stop being called sluts and we want it to be okay for us to sleep around. And when you start just taking off the guardrails of society, right, that says like, hey, sex should be between one man and one woman, and you should come together and start a family. And that's how you form a constructive and healthy society. When we took off the bumpers and we said, actually, we should all just be able to have sex with whoever we want without judgment. Don't tell me what to do, and my body, my choice. And now I should be able to kill a baby if
Right.
there's some repercussions from that ideology that I'm prescribed to or subscribe to. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, feminists did this. They caused
Yeah.
it. They got us to that place
Such a good
where
point.
men
Yeah.
can be in women's sports because they've said, hey, like, we want to be free. We want to be free from all sexual restraints. And that's
Mhm.
going to eventually, if you follow the logical conclusion, it's going to lead. I can choose even what, you can't tell me what to do at all with my body. You can't even tell me what gender I am. So I can
Right.
do whatever I want.
Such
Yeah.
a good point. And yeah, just like everything that the left does, it's a progression. Like they are literal
Slippery slope.
progressives.
Yeah.
And so they believe in that constant agitation and that progress of pushing it to this point
Right.
now where they're like what's up is down and down is up, and
Yeah.
there's no real right and wrong anymore in our society. People hardly can answer like what is truth. I mean, like I said, you can't even define a woman anymore. And so it's just we've gotten to a point where I feel like we are living in an insane asylum. Like every single day, I am like, these people are off their freaking rockers, and
1000%. They've just
it
jumped off the cliff.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think something also we've all talked about is just like it's hard to consider everything that's happening in our culture without bringing up this spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
And something we haven't really talked about on the show quite yet, but like we are living through a spiritual war, literally. And that's kind of the only way you're able to make sense of the nonsense. Like,
Yeah.
it's just we're dealing with a new level of evil where
Right.
evil doesn't even, is not even scared to hide its face anymore because we've taken off those more moral guardrails
Construct.
that like what Natalie was saying, like they've just diminished all responsibility for self and taking like part in who you are as a citizen. Like everyone just lives for themselves now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to say, especially with the spiritual aspect of it too, it's allowed people to absolve themselves of any personal responsibility. And I think
Mhm.
when it really comes down to it, what I don't know if this was like truly framed this way, but I feel like the founding fathers really took time to understand that in order to be a functioning society that like is can be sustained for a long period of time, we as adults and as human beings have to realize that mistakes are made and we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions and judge ourselves based on our character and
Mhm.
the content of our character and our actions. And like Natalie, you were saying, it's a very easy solution for people to be like, oh well, okay, instead of just changing what I'm doing, I can just not label myself, which I'm not saying like labels are good or labels are bad. It's about how, like, do you have any morality? Are you structuring your life and your actions based on any type of code of conduct or any base of values, and morals? And that's
Right.
important, I think, also like in order to allow people to have that freedom, like lack of or lack thereof, because eventually they get sucked into whatever the agenda of the state is. They really don't have the freedom. They're actually enslaved to the system of that ideology. But in order to do that, you need to break down their spirit. You need to break down any type of spirituality they have, or any type of, oh, there's something bigger than me. There's a purpose here.
Mhm.
I'm a part of something bigger than me. And that's it, like a, death of self, which modern liberals don't and can't do. They are their own, they can create their own reality.
Yeah.
Everything. Sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
I was just going to say, yeah, and really all you have to do, if you're the state and that's your goal, all you have to do is take away people's conviction, right? Make them just a little unsure, because if you're not super convicted about what your values are,
Mhm.
like with religion, for instance, you are going to let things slide. You're going to let things go. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? If there's guys in women's sports, like, who cares?
Yes.
What's the big deal? You know, and
100%.
you don't regard the truth. It's like the truth for the truth's sake. Like, if we don't have a standard of what the truth is, I mean, how can we function in society?
Yeah.
So
So
true.
you lower people's convictions. You make them not really stand up for what they deep down believe is right, because it's sort of like, what's the harm? Everybody else is letting it slide. What's the big deal? And then before you know it, I mean, you've slid into tyranny.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, everything you guys are talking about, it really reminds me of The Naked Communist. And it's one of my favorite books. I highly recommend it. I think I've talked to you both about it. But W. Cleon Skousen talks about just
So
like
good.
the literal foundation of the communist ideology. And this is literally what it is. It's
Mhm.
the demoralization of a society to not even have anything to stand on or protect or have a purpose. And they truly believe that we are in this a purposeless universe with, no God. There should be no morale. They literally want to release themselves of all morality and responsibility in society. And literally, you guys explained it perfectly that this is truly like the manifestation of the Communist Manifesto.
Mhm.
And they've had to demoralize us over the last, I would say the good 10, 15, maybe 20 years, to get to this point they want. And then ultimately, not to mention this whole trans agenda has a certain role in like transhumanism and breaking down just all gender norms and
Yeah.
all gender differences. They want specifically Americans to not embrace being American, not being like, they don't want us to embrace our gender or sexuality. It's just everything is the same. And
Yeah.
they don't want any like differences among anyone. And it's all about conformity and control ultimately.
Yeah, and destabilization.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I
I think
mean,
Yuri Bezmenov talks about that a lot, and it's a
Mhm.
psychological subversion what we're living through with this type of propaganda and the way that they're able to just, I don't know. Like a good example is like, they call us fascist, right? And like whatever, we're not fascist. Fascism, for people who do not understand, it's literally like privately owned, you could still have your privately owned, company or whatever, but it's a ton of government control. And so,
Restrictions.
yeah, and so you'll get censorship, obviously, under fascism.
Doesn't that just ultimately lead to like full on control? I don't or there is a stopping point, because I think that's the thing that people don't understand is like a little bit of socialism doesn't like turn out well, you know what I mean? And people always use the example of like the Nordic model or whatever,
Yeah.
and that may work for them, but people don't understand how small those countries are and how stagnant they are.
Yeah.
And they also like it just the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't work when you have like so many different areas of a country that are completely different and function in different ways, have different benefits and
I mean, we're a
cultures
constitutional
and
republic. Yeah, we're a constitutional republic, not a democracy, meaning that every state has its own constitution and their own rights. And so it's never going to be what Sweden is or like Denmark or whatever. And not to
Right.
mention those people, those countries have way higher taxes.
Yeah,
this
like
is kind of-
60 to 80%.
yeah. So yeah, again, it's never going to work. And it's just they still do have a lot of government control and these huge government programs, but people still admire the way that it's set up because it's like this partial, democratic capitalism situation, but it just gets really messy and convoluted. So anyway,
Yeah. And the bigger the country gets, to your point, Sunny, is the less connected you feel to your peers, your neighbors, your society, the people who are, helping to sustain you. So what responsibility do you have for them? Why should I not live off of the state? I'm not like, I don't even really know my neighbors. I don't really know the guy who's like 1,000 miles away from me paying his taxes.
Right.
We're not really homogenous. And the tighter knit your community, like a church, for example, we are to help our brother, right? But also when you're a close community, you feel a sense of responsibility to your community, not to just like suck all the resources of it. Get help when you need it and offer help when you're able to. But having a relationship with the people that you're relying on really creates this dynamic where you're not going to take advantage of it. And I've already seen in the United States, and we're not even like, socialists like Denmark or whatever, but people I know who are just living off of the state because they can, who are young people, who are a lot of people who come out to LA who have dreams of working in, the movie industry or whatever. Like I know multiple people who are living off the government while they're here, because what sense of responsibility? Why do they care?
Yeah.
A big country, there's no face, to put to it.
right.
We've really lost that. We've really lost
Yeah.
that. It's like a dirty word to say you're patriotic at this point. And I think also like to add to that, people who are kind of somewhere in the middle who don't necessarily have like an opinion or know about like, the benefits of like being a constitutional republic versus socialist, like they don't really even know what it is. This whole like washing down of the societal structure and like moral construct, it forces those people into, I think it pushes them even further, like, well, whatever, like it doesn't even matter, like they just don't have an opinion, so they'll just go down the slippery slope anyways because it's too confusing, it's too much, it's too chaotic, it doesn't even matter. And then they fall into a situation occasionally where you're getting literally paid to live on the street in places like LA and Chicago, where it's like people have Netflix and get a paycheck to live in a tent on the street corner. It's that blows my mind. I don't know why. I mean, I understand why some people would want to do that, and I that brings me to the point of like drugs are a real problem. Like it's not about housing necessarily. You can put all those drug addicts in a house and that's not going to make their drug problem go away. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think what you you were saying with like the just the entitlement to, you know, live off the state or like not say anything, that kind of thing. I think a lot of those people are just like scared to actually speak the truth because, like, in the name of like, you know, inclusivity, but that's also
Yeah.
the communist mob. They're afraid
Mhm.
that the mob is going to come after them. And, like, you know, we started off this podcast talking about Riley Gaines, and she was attacked at San Francisco State University the other night, punched in the face by a grown man who thinks he's a woman. And, you know, honestly, like these people, it's hard for me to like, you know, I don't know how to word this specifically, but like my heart does go out to people who are truly confused. Like I know that there
Mhm.
is true confusion like that, and that is rooted in the devil's schemes. But I also don't like, I want to be careful not to pass judgment on them because I like they're a sinner, I'm a sinner too. So it's not coming from a place of like, oh, I'm more like, you know, better than them or whatever, because I really am not. Ultimately, these people do need Jesus. But secondly, like I mean, you can't dismiss, you know, the dangerous ideology that they've like been overcome by.
Succumbed to, yeah.
Yeah, and you have
Yeah.
to call it out because ultimately I want to defend, you know, the like girlhood and womanhood for my like future children and my nieces. Like I want them to have the same opportunities that I had, and I don't ever want to have a conversation with them that like I didn't do the most that I could have to
Yeah.
help, you know, protect locker rooms and sports teams and whatever it is. And sadly, I don't think it's honestly going to be going away anytime soon. So it's just like, how do we, you know, go forward from here? I don't know.
I was listening to Michael Knowles earlier today, and he
Uh-huh.
was saying that I don't know how to like word this as well as he did, but essentially there is some genre of porn that's like transgender pornography,
Mm-hmm.
and when people watch it, it's got like a spell
Mm.
or something. I don't know how he worded it, but basically a
Yeah.
lot of this increase we're seeing in trans people corresponds to an increase in online searches on porn sites for transgender porn.
Wow.
And
Wow.
one guy was saying that um, he started watching transgender porn, and he at first would imagine himself as the man, and then after enough time, this is like so graphic, and I'm just like saying it how I remember it,
Yeah.
but then after some time, like maybe a couple of years or something of doing that, he started like being drawn to being the woman, this like being in the submissive role or something. And so, and he was saying that he read a bunch of articles of people talking about it, and people were basically saying like something about that genre, or I don't know what you call it, that kind of porn, um,
It's
really
having an effect.
it does something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan Ducky has talked about this as well, and I think one of her followers told her this as well, like the fact that like this kind of porn that you're talking about is like, I don't know, a kink or something, and
Mm.
like people like these men are like getting off on like being in these women's spaces, and it's like nothing is literally more demonic to me, I think.
Sick. Literally sick to
That
Yeah.
me.
this is all coming out of this porn problem that we've had with among men specifically for so long.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know that like took a weird turn, so we don't have to keep going down that.
All
Well,
right.
I just,
Right.
yeah. I think also it, I think it's important to use analogies like when you have someone who's anorexic, like, do you encourage them to not eat? Like,
Mhm.
I don't understand why it's okay to ignore the clear problems that we're seeing in people who, express these types of feelings. And I think ultimately, like, as human beings, we are searching for a purpose. Many people are like searching for something. You want answers, you want to feel worthy, you want to feel deserving. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I do something meaningful. And I think, unfortunately, because of that, instead of, like, turning to God, and that can kind of help bring us the trust and faith that we need to just get through, because we don't know the answers ultimately. And a lot of people, a lot of people can't handle that, but in a lot of ways, it pushes them to do things that makes them feel like there is a solution to the problem. And of course, as we know, self-mutilation is not the answer to the problem and leads to dramatically more suicides. Like, it's statistically proven. They've done studies over 10, 15, 20 years, because this has been happening also in foreign countries. Like, there are, it's like a thing, so it's very crazy that this is something that we're encouraging. I think you're right, Allie. I don't think it's going away. And that's I was going to bring up the whole thing about Dylan Mulvaney being like a freaking spokesperson. Like, it's, oh gosh, I don't even know how to like make sense of it. Like, and then someone brought up, I was listening to Megyn Kelly's, and one of her guests brought up that he's like the spokesperson for Tampax, and I'm like, am I like losing my mind? Like, what's happening?
I know.
I don't understand.
Also, just like a PSA personally, like a press statement from the current conservative: please stop posting Dylan Mulvaney videos.
Seriously, I can't stand it.
I've been commenting like on posts like, please stop sharing this person's stuff. Like, I think that we're feeding into like the monster by like sharing it widely on our platforms. And like, of course, people push back and they're like, oh, we need to be aware of it. And I'm like, oh, I think that we're all very aware of what's going on.
I think I got it. Okay.
Oh, we got the picture. I don't know. Do you guys like vibe with that? But like,
I don't know, because I saw that in the last like week or so, since Bud Light put out their can with Dylan Mulvaney, that I think their sales dropped or something by like 30%, or maybe it was their stock or something. So in some sense, it's like, and then Dan Bongino was saying like, we don't have to like send a message. We don't have to boycott everybody. We just have to get one of them like really good, right? Like, that's the example. Like, boycotting is hard, but like, if you can like choose one and set the example, like, this is what happens when you do this. And you know what's so funny is, people have been saying, like, I think it was Candace Owens, I was like, why is it that the men are going in the women's sports and the women, it's not like happening the other way around?
Yeah.
It's like, because the men wouldn't put up with it. And who drinks Bud Light?
Men. Yeah. That's
I would
so
love
true.
for like a transgender person to try to get in the NBA or get on the Lakers or whatever. This stuff would end immediately. Like, you mess with my basketball, you mess with my
also like
my football, like,
yeah,
it's over.
I don't understand why it's like a big deal for people to be like, yeah, men are like, you don't have like a woman going into powerlifting and competing against men. Like, they're stronger. Like, I'm sorry, like, we're built different.
Right.
It's an all-out attack on women because we're providers of life. Like, we have different strengths,
Yep.
But the whole point, right, is it's not about your skill level, because if it were, we wouldn't let the men in, because we would acknowledge that it's unfair. It's about having compassion. Right. So why don't we have these diversity hires on the NBA or whatever? Because it's not about skill. It's about diversity, inclusion. So include the women. They might not be as good as you, but include them, because that's what it's about, right?
So
let them destroy the
right?
NBA, let them destroy the NFL, and we just end this like right here, right now.
So true. I've been wondering that. I'm like, why aren't any women wanting to play men's sports? Such a weird concept.
They get freaking railroaded.
Yeah, and then also don't forget, like, the U.S. soccer women's team. They competed, like, they did like a scrimmage or something against a team of boys that were 15 years old, and the U.S. women's soccer team lost to the boys that were 15.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I remember
easily
that.
put. Yeah. simply said,
Hi.
men have bigger hearts. They have bigger bones. They
Yeah.
have a longer,
Arm span, yeah,
I
wingspan,
almost
yeah.
said wingspan. Is it
I think
wingspan?
it
You went
is.
wingspan.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, like, literally,
Oh my God.
they're meant to do just heavier lifting things, and women we don't have to explain this. We're
Yeah.
completely built different.
Well, and like the same goes too for like what they're doing to men, because they're like the emasculation of men, the degradation of like the strength of men. That's a thing too. So
Well,
it's like they're both of us.
I
Everyone's
mean,
just getting
I
attacked here.
remember when like the toxic masculinity
Oh
conversation
my
started,
gosh.
like probably 10 years ago at this point, and like what we were saying with the progressive slippery slope,
Yeah.
and of course they had to start breaking down men 10 years ago, and then they progressed on
Feminizing.
all of these other agenda talking points, and then now here we are, like, boys,
Yeah.
like teenage and young men, boys do not have like strong male examples anymore in society.
Right.
I mean, like, they could search them out, but really what they're getting fed is like, wear dresses, paint your nails, be soft. Have you guys seen guys wear pearl necklaces? I've seen several guys wear like pearls, and I'm like, I am so confused. But this is that like non-binary Harry
Yeah,
Styles
yeah, yeah,
type
yeah, yeah.
thing happening.
Like, yeah.
Just fluid, non-binary.
Androgynous kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so strange to
Yeah.
me. So yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, you said something earlier, Natalie, about like I mean, we're all talking about it. It's a slippery slope where you think like, oh, it's not going to get to to the point where it is now, where men are literally competing as women in women's sports and winning trophies. Like the fact that we're even saying that is mind-boggling to me. But it's like I, went to a school where that like it was very liberal, and I remember being around, like I was in this like, on this committee or whatever, and there was someone who had like, he had like acrylic nails and he was like all like done up and stuff, but like short hair, like still looked kind of like a man, but like dressed like a woman. So I don't know where he fell into the category. I didn't know him, but like just from appearance, but the acrylic nails always like gets it for me. But it's just,
Yeah.
it's interesting because like I remember thinking to myself, and that wasn't the first time that I had seen something like that. I was like very liberal at school, but I remember thinking like, I'm just gonna ignore this, like I was even a culprit of that. Like this can't, like this isn't going to like be long lived. You know what I mean? Like this can't go anywhere. Like how is this gonna get off the ground? You know what I mean? Like we're talking about such a small percentage of people. Like most people don't freaking believe this. Like most people don't want this. They don't believe it. They don't think it's real. It's not a thing. Like they're just not amused by this whole thing, but they just choose to ignore it because they don't think that anything's going to happen. And
Yeah,
I
they
think
don't know
it's
what to do
important
about it.
too. Yeah, and I think it's important too to realize that like the companies, like boycotting and I think it's important to tell these companies we do not support what you're doing. I think it's extremely important because we need to show our voice somehow, and that is like one way to do it. But at the same time, like they're not making these policies because they think that they're going to make more money off of it. They're making these policies because they're beholden to the people who own stocks and the C-suite level people who have stock options. And if they don't fall in line and they don't follow suit, then they will get fired, and then they lose their entire
You're
like
talking about like
livelihoods.
the ESG thing,
And the
Yeah.
and
CEI consumer
yeah,
index, whatever
DEI.
thing. And it's like
equality index or
they
something.
get points like as a
Right.
corporation to be following human rights stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. So where were you when the Uyghurs were getting murdered and still are in China? You know what I'm saying?
So
Like,
I think, yeah. So why though? Why do those C-suite people want to do that? I think that's a good thing to explain to the audience. Like we're hearing a lot about that, but why? Why do they want to push this stuff?
I
I
don't.
think it ultimately again falls under the overarching theme of transhumanism and the agenda to basically psychological subversion. Like they're literally, so when the USSR took over Eastern Europe, they used something called salami tactics, and they would do this in the media where they would slowly cut out the original narrative and then they would fill it in with their own ideology. And that's what we're living through right now is salami style tactics. And so like little by little, they'll just move it along. That's why you can never give the communist mob an inch, because they will work towards
Take a mile.
a mile. And so, like, I guess the why again is they want a godless society with no morals. The communist ideology is literally that. Karl Marx said that, and that's what they're trying to basically manifest in America, who stands on God and freedom. We're completely opposite. God, family, and freedom. We are literally the last beacon of hope. And I hear this a lot, like with people who've left socialist and communist countries. It's like, where else are we going to go?
Yeah.
There's literally no other place. So
Yeah.
if they can take down America, they got this on lock, and they figured it out that they just need to infiltrate us ideologically through the way that we think, rather than with tanks and the army, really, like how we've seen with invasions and infiltration in the past.
It's soft power.
I think that's certainly where we're at. And I think in the realm of like something interesting to point out with the feminist movement, it's a little bit of a spicier take, but if you research like women's suffrage, and you will find like that such a very small amount of women wanted to actually pass women's suffrage, and it was kind of like forced down the throats of a lot of women, because I mean, I obviously I didn't live during the women's suffrage, but I don't think that a lot of women were really wanting to go into the workforce. But in the workforce and voting and all of that, I think feminism pushed open the doors for so much of the degradation that we've talked about on this episode. The breakdown of the family, the normalizing of divorce, the normalizing of homosexuality, no morale, no responsibility. The mothers
Abortion.
Abortion. Mothers aren't in the home; they're out working. They
can get taxed too.
Yeah, they can tax two incomes. No longer does an American family live on one income. We need two now because of debt and, government loans and subsidies. I don't know. It definitely was a key move to expand the federal government, centralize power, and create a soft democracy. I heard this term the other day and I'm like, oh my gosh, that describes so much. Like, was it a soft democracy? I think maybe they said feminine democracy. And I know that we're not a democracy, but when you get a feminine democracy, it no longer has these guardrails like what you're talking about, and everything goes, and there's no real, societal norm. And I for one, like I can't think of any other country who has gone through, what America is currently going through. Like this particular era is so unique to human history. And I think a lot of us are just like, what the heck do we do? Ultimately, God's in control. So I don't get like too stressed out. Thankfully, I have my faith. I feel bad for those that don't have a faith, because I don't know how they work through these things. I don't.
Well, they let it slide until things they won't really have to confront it until things get bad enough to have to confront it.
Yeah.
I don't know how they watch, drag queen story hours and kids getting lap dances from drag queens. Like, I don't know how people watch that and think, oh, that's not good, but what can you do? Like, I don't know how people can stay in the middle after seeing stuff like that.
It's because of the demoralization. It's
yeah,
lowered our standards on so many things.
and being desensitized, it's just
Totally.
everything is so sensational. Like you see these
Right.
parades and festivals, and it's like, just how freaking crazy demonic and like scary can you be, and people love to
Mhm.
see it. Like they just want to see how like depraved it can be.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's such a good point. And also I saw something the other day, and it was like it was talking about how, we conservatives, we didn't have a problem with like drag shows when they're happening at gay bars, like because that was a particular, you know,
Niche.
part of the city. Yeah, and if you wanted to go see that, you could. Like there were no protests then. Obviously, it was among all consenting adults. But now they've, pushed it onto our children, and it's become now a more of a, a something that the public needs to take part in to stop it.
But
And I just
That's
actually,
the that's the
for,
problem. Go ahead.
yeah, for
Mhm,
me, that makes me think, well, was that inevitable? You allowed
Mhm.
it a little bit. You said that's okay, you do you. And
mhm,
was it inevitable? Like, can you separate what you do in your personal life from how you present to society and how you influence society? Like, can you really do that? Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
I think that's the problem too, is that a lot of people don't see that it's wrong. Like they see it as an open-mindedness. They see, "Oh, I'm introducing my children to being open and accepting and inclusive." That's the
right.
scariest part to me, is like you see these parents get confronted and they're like, "Oh, it like no, like yeah, I want to," or freaking country stars like parading around with drag queens on stages with kids watching and saying, "Yeah, I'm going to come arrest me. I'm going to introduce my son to a drag
right.
queen or whatever." Like,
Mhm.
great, please arrest someone, please arrest her. Like please,
Yeah.
because it's just, like that's really scary to me, and I think that is a really like important part of this, is that like the whole thing with the communism coming in, being infiltrated here, people don't even know what communism is. So like they can't point
Mhm.
out or like identify what's happening. They just think times are changing, we're evolving. Like that
Yeah.
woman said in the marketing thing of the Bud Light, she's like, "Well, we need to evolve and change. And how do we do that? Well, we become more inclusive." They might know what they're doing, but like their audience doesn't. So
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
even, do they even know what they're doing? Like, who is really, behind it? Like, the
I
marketing lady, does she know?
I think certainly. I think obviously this is all very intentional.
yeah.
So, I mean, I talk about like, the incompetence of the Biden admin, but like really it's very an intentional incompetence, It's there's an intention behind everything, and nothing just really just happens by coincidence anymore. It's
Yeah.
all very planned, and there is a political agenda with,
Oh my
this
gosh.
whole ideology for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was like, the article that showing you guys earlier about this woman named Saul Amarova, was the nominee in 2021 for comptroller of currency. You're like, "Oh, completely regular job." Like, how can she be like an infiltrator, No,
Mhm.
well, I mean, her nomination was eventually withdrawn in December of 2021. So I guess maybe because she had a lot of critics from Congress. But I just found it so interesting because she grew up in Soviet Kazakhstan, and she's claims she doesn't support socialism and communism, but she's talking about how those countries are so much better because they don't have the gender gap that we have here, and that
Mm.
what does it say, people's salaries should be set in a gender blind manner, and all women, irrespective of any gender gap, should get the munificent maternity benefits, but things are still like a dream in our living society. And she wrote a paper about how to democratize banks and the financial system in a way that's like inclusive.
Mm.
So it's like you can see how they're trying to blend all, like the the this is the structure of like our financial system with like gender neutrality. Why are those two
Mhm.
things even like related
Right.
in the same conversation?
Mhm. So interesting. I remember when the Biden admin had that girl, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name. She was also like Russian or something, and she was in the she was going to be the chairwoman of the disinformation. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
What
I
was
can't
her name?
remember.
The Ministry of Truth lady?
Yeah,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
bizarre. I don't know. That just reminded me of that girl.
She was weird.
Let me
Her
see.
smile. She was so scary.
Can you
Oh
believe
my
they even
gosh.
tried that?
Oh,
Like
Nina
how?
Jankowicz?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Like
she wrote a book and it was just so ironic. No, I can't even believe that. I mean, the backlash had to be so much for them to just pull the entire thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think they're pretty dang emboldened to even try that, though. What was
Mhm.
it? A disinformation governance board or something like that?
Yeah.
It was something like that. It's like
Yeah.
that's like that is a reach. Like
Yeah.
really? You know?
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah, you're right.
then
Disinformation Governance Board.
right, and then
Mhm.
you combine
I
that with them indicting Trump,
Oh
right?
god.
And
Yeah.
it's like you're looking at these things and what you were talking about earlier, like I think when you were talking about fascism, you were talking about how they slowly in the Soviet Union they slowly changed the
Mhm.
narrative. They little by little they changed
Salami
it.
tactics. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see how okay, you're getting conservatives are banned on Instagram, YouTube, we're censored. Um, things like that. And it's like the things that they're doing, how does a normal person look at that and be like, "Eh,
Me. Well, because
Because they're not paying attention.
I think they just
yeah,
also don't know history. Like,
Yeah.
people do not know what these little ins and outs were, how they maneuvered themselves, and made their ideology look really good. And
right,
honestly, the socialists are very good at that.
Yeah.
Like how we're talking about how they changed wording and they use,
Yeah.
inclusivity and diversity,
Right.
equity, and inclusion.
Equality. Yeah, it's gonna be equal. Why shouldn't we all share?
Right.
Why yeah.
They pull at the
exactly.
heartstrings. They pull out those heartstrings of people, and so it's like you get emotion involved. And again, women are very
Exactly.
emotionally, we go with our emotions a lot. And so of course they wanted, you know,
Yeah.
feminists, women suffrage,
Exactly.
etc. I'm not
And feminine
necessarily
men.
yeah, I'm not necessarily
Alice
like
doesn't want to vote. She wants to repeal women's suffrage.
yeah, please no. Maybe not all the way, but there's certain things that you need to question everything, guys. Question
Yes.
everything.
Moral of the story, question everything.
There's always been an agenda. You just have to find it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anything else to add, guys?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun conversation. These are my favorite kinds of talks.
Yeah, super fun. And
Well,
I think we covered a lot of ground.
yeah.
For sure.
These are important topics, and it's important for people just to hear because they who knows if someone's going to hear it and it's going to like jog something that they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way or never thought of that
Right.
perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well,
So
thanks
true.
for joining
For sure.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me,
Thanks,
guys.
Natalie. All
Hope
right.
everybody liked it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. All right. Bye.
Bye. Oh, yeah.
Oh, here comes the
Dance
music again,
party.
girl. Dance party.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye.